Who taught you to hate the color of your skin? Who taught you to hate the texture of your hair? Who taught you to hate the shape of your nose and the shape of your lips? Who taught you to hate yourself from the top of your head to the soles of your feet? Who taught you to hate your own kind? Who taught you to hate the race that you belong to? So much so that you don't want to be around each other. No, before you come asking Mr. Muhammad, does he teach hate, you should ask yourself, who taught you to hate being what God gave you?
Most of us blacks, or Negroes as he called us, really thought we were free without being aware that in our subconscious, all those chains we thought had been struck off were still there. And there were many ways where what really motivated us was our desire to be loved by the white man. Malcolm meant to lance that sense of inferiority. He knew it would be painful. He knew that people could kill you because of it, but he dared to take that risk.
He was saying something over and above that of any other leader of that day. While the other leaders were begging for entry into the house of their oppressor, he was telling you to build your own house.
Named Shakespeare. I only read about him passingly, but I remember one thing he wrote that kind of moved me. He put it in the mouth of Hamlet, I think it was, who said, to be or not to be. He was in doubt about something. Whether it was nobler in the mind of man to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, moderation, or to take up arms against the sea of troubles and by opposing, end them. And I go for that. If you take up arms, you'll end it. But if you sit around and wait for the one who's in power to make up his mind that he should end it, you'll be waiting a long time. And in my opinion, the young generation of whites, blacks, browns, whatever else there is, you're living at a time of extremism, a time of revolution, a time when there's got to be a change. People in power have misused it, and now there has to be a change, and a better world has to be built, and the only way it's going to be built is with extreme methods. And I, for one, will join in with anyone, don't care what color you are, as long as you want to change this miserable condition that exists on this earth. Thank you.
Malcolm was always
history is a clock that people use to tell their political and cultural time of day. It is also a compass that people use to find themselves on the map of human geography. History tells of people where they have been and what they have been, where they are and what they are. Most important, history tells a people where they still must go and what they still must be. The relationship of history to the people is the same as the relationship of a mother to her child.
Welcome to the Gilchrist Experience. Welcome. Today's guest is a hero of mine. You see him every Sunday at 12 o'clock, Channel 7, like it is. Mr. Gil Noble, producer's producer. Welcome to the show, Gil. It's always a pleasure to have you on. And I just ran a whole scenario of, we were talking about early on the telephone how what's put out in the industry, people take clips of this and clips of that, and you were just telling me this Oxford piece is something that you had done.
No, I didn't do it, but I got it from England.
Okay.
Many, many years ago. I was trying to, I had heard about the Oxford Union debate. Malcolm had written about that debate. And I set out to try to find it, and BBC had covered the event. So I approached them and didn't have much luck. Wouldn't you know it, about 6 months later they called me and said that they were looking for some footage on Marcus Garvey. And did I have any? I said, yes. They said, well, we'd like to have some. I said, well, I'll think about it. So they said, well, what is it that you require? I said, well, I hear tell that you have some footage on Malcolm's debate at the Oxford University.
Oxford, right.
So we did a barter exchange. And so I brought it across the Atlantic in that way and put it on Like It Is.
Fabulous. And that's 30, 35 years now?
No, I would put it closer to about 20, 25 years
25.
ago. But it was magnificent. He didn't have much longer to live, as you can see with his beard and whatnot.
Right.
But one of the things that he himself confessed is that he had a fatal attraction for an exchange, conversation, debating. And so even though he was running for his life, he was invited to participate in this debate in England. And the theme was taken from what Barry Goldwater said when he won the Republican convention, the Republican nomination. At the convention, he said to many of the advisors who had told him to stay away from the extremists because that'll cost you votes. And he wouldn't do that. He stayed with the extremists and the radical conservatives. And he got the nomination anyway. So at his acceptance speech, he said, let me say this to you, my friends, that extremism in defense of liberty is no vice. Moderation in pursuit of justice has no virtue. So the Oxford Debating Society heard that and were intrigued by that, so they decided to have a debate. And they invited Malcolm to come over from the States and argue in support of extremism. And so he couldn't resist it, so he went over. And he gave him a good spanking.
As you see by the piece there, he came out and said that no matter what color you are, to fight the system,
Yes.
that it takes extremism. Do you feel that we're at that point now in our history?
Well, as he himself said, the condition of our people is extreme. And so extreme conditions require extreme action. So, yeah, I believe that. I think he's right.
Where do we go from here? You see what happened in year 2000, stolen election, we were disenfranchised in Florida. Definitely the guy we wanted in wasn't voted in. He was selected, not elected. And then the whole history of the Bush family, being in all the many years, 9/11. There's a conspiracy theory out that the Bush family knew something about this. The Saudis were allowed to leave immediately after 9/11. They were allowed to escape, as a lot of people say, because 19 of the terrorists were Saudis. Most of them were, I think, 11 out of the 19 were Saudis.
Well, there were over a dozen members of the royal Saudi family in the United States.
Right, exactly.
And after the buildings were destroyed, all the skies over America were cleared. Nothing was allowed to fly, but strangely enough, a plane went all around the country, hopscotched to various airports and picked up members of the royal Saudi family and flew them out of the country. Nobody has really owned up to who allowed that, but it was noteworthy.
Also, there were war games going on during 9/11. Supposedly
Yes, I heard that.
Right?
I heard that.
So with all these suspicions, and matter of fact, the World Trade Center is supposed to have been sold to an Australian 3 months prior to the 9/11. So there are all sorts of conspiracy theories flying around, and yet 2004, he runs against another skull and bones, Kerry, and again there's suspicion about the second election. I heard in Ohio there were 300,000 votes not counted, black in particular. I think it was on your program, wasn't it?
Greg Palast.
Greg Palast, right? Now, as a producer and as a historian and seeing all these different things go on, you know, Malcolm in his day, and watching just the last 4 years, what's the state of black America, much less America itself? Where do you see us going? What's going on, in other words, as Marvin Gaye would say?
I think that there have been some gains, but there have been some long, protracted periods of stagnation. And I think it stems out of the fact that some of us were given positions of opportunity in this country where they had never been available before. And some put those advantages and opportunities to good use. Some did not. They took advantage of the positions to advance self. So I think that there was sort of a rupture in the unity that had existed during the civil rights movement. And many today, and I've heard this criticism far and wide, that many of those of us of color who have done well have developed a severe case of amnesia and have forgotten how they got the jobs and the advantages and the lifestyle that they enjoy today. And they don't relate back to the communities from whence they came. So I think that there have been losses. While many are in prominent positions, there are many of those who were in those positions who are not flexing the kind of ethnic muscle that they could. And so there's been a backside to it and a black side to it, in that the condition of African Americans is at the same time severe. It's no secret that half the black men in New York City are unemployed. The whole condition of black America remains severe. And I think that much of which you spoke, the election, where black people's votes were disenfranchised, is because perhaps we may have played a part in allowing it. We should have been more vigilant, especially after the preceding 4-year election. You see? So I think that sometimes what happens to you, you allowed it. You know, Frederick Douglass said, find the amount of hell that you're willing to catch, and you've established and identified the exact amount of hell that you're going to catch. So I think that I'm not really coming down so hard on our people, but I think we do need to be reminded of that. White racism, of course, is the ultimate disease, but I think that we can do more to stand up and fight it and correct it.
What about what Bill Cosby said about it's really our fault? I can't quote him, but you're familiar with his.
Oh, sure. I had him on the program.
Okay.
And we talked a great deal about his comments, for which he caught an awful lot of flack. But my position is that Bill Cosby has the credentials to critique our condition.
Also to change the conditions too.
Yeah, yes, and he's done a lot.
Okay.
You see? It's not that he sat in a corner with his arms folded and did nothing and then just jumped out and made this statement that has proven so controversial. He's got a track record of helping people.
Okay.
You know, and giving money and time. And also the quality of his work is something that we can all be proud of. He's not done anything on the screen to denigrate us. I think, though, that what he had to say, that controversial statement about black families in the inner city and should be more responsible.
Right.
And
Needed to be said.
it needed to be said, and I think that he had the qualifications to say it. And many of the people who criticize him and, you know, have a lot of trouble with what he said haven't said anything themselves, you see? And I don't think it's fair to expect a problem this deep that is confronting us to be addressed perfectly in all dimensions in one speech. He spoke up and lifted up a scab that needed to be. And I salute him for that. And he has sponsored a lot of constructive thought, you see. And I'm just hoping that some people who were criticizing him will step up and say something themselves and do something themselves. Right now, Bill Cosby is going around from inner city to inner city without fanfare, talking with these gangs, talking with young people. I've seen him, I've been with him in that process.
You don't hear anything about that.
Exactly. He's quite a man. He's quite serious, and I salute him for that. He's a hero of mine.
Well, you know, this is what the problem is. The media controls, I mean, the corporations control the media, as you well know.
I've noticed that.
All right. if we don't have control over the media, we don't get to hear stories about Bill Cosby. I remember there was at one point he was going to buy NBC, was it?
Yes,
NBC?
he did. He wanted to buy NBC.
Why wasn't he allowed, or why aren't we allowed to control our own images?
I don't know the ins and outs of it. I heard that the financing that he needed, he wasn't putting up all the financing, I hear. And the companion package that he needed and had been committed to, the people who had the money, at the last minute they pulled out. Why? I do not know.
Okay.
What was it that you would ask?
The question was about the media control. I was thinking that maybe today one of the answers to our question is to have I'd like to see a television station owned by and controlled by us.
Amen.
And somebody such as yourself being in some sort of director's control on what's put on the air.
I think it's a great idea, but it costs money to run a TV station.
Okay.
It costs money to pay the salaries and buy the equipment, as you well know.
Okay.
And one of the things that we have not done as a people is developed our economic strengths.
Okay.
There are a lot of us in this country, and we spend an awful lot of money in this country, but yet there is no community that I'm aware of that we control. The Harlems of America, the economy of the Harlems of America are not controlled by us. In any black community that you go into, even though you may see black people who have made it and are enjoying a good lifestyle, we don't control the economy of that community. And so that has many repercussions because it compromises our ability to influence media, to influence schooling, to influence police, politics, everything. Money is what really influences all the things that have sway over our lives. So I think that if we want media, we're going to have to really develop some economic strength. Because I don't think that it can be expected to come from those who have other agendas. I think it is right, if we want to have our own say, that we should be financing that ourselves, and we have the money. We're spending the money.
Right.
You go in our communities and you see all these corporations that are making money in our community, but they take that money home, as Malcolm said.
Right.
At the end of the day, they take that basket full of money that they've earned off of us and take it to their communities and bank in their communities. And so our communities remain poor and poorer and poorer. And this is a global situation.
Right.
You go to Africa, same thing. Right. The economy of the African countries are not controlled by Africans. South Africa doesn't control, black South Africans don't control those diamond mines.
That's right.
The oil in Nigeria is not controlled by black Nigerians. So everywhere you go, it's the same situation. And I'm hoping that that can change. And that's one of the wonderful things about Malcolm, that he had risen in such a short time to have such a tremendous analytical ability. And so he saw this, and he was talking about it. He said, we're up against a power structure. Is it a local power structure? No. Is it a national power structure? No. Then what kind of power structure? I know this speech by heart. He said, a Western power structure. In other words, there's a national, international power structure that's operative. And if we're going to have any sway over the manner in which they behave, we're going to have to demand it.
Okay.
And that includes media.
Yeah. Well, you know, my ambition, we've talked about this other times you've been on the show. I have an ambition. I'm a little radical in my thinking. I like for all Harlemites to get together, and I've said this on my show several times, and throw up fences around Harlem and claim it as our land. I mean, we should be fighting for Harlem as our homeland. I mean, people should realize how the rich culture that we have to fight for. I mean, you were born and raised in Harlem, and it's sad to think that our young people don't have that same energy. So it's going to take, you know, elders' statements such as yourself to lead the way in direction. I still have an ambition to own a television station in Harlem, at least an M&N uptown, at least something like this uptown where we have free television and people can express themselves. Because I find that this is the most rewarding thing that I've ever done in life. And watching you over the years, it's just so, I mean, the imagery that you've put on of our people over the last 30 years that you've been around has been so empowering. I mean, we talked about that piece of the young lady that had a problem with her color. You remember?
Oh, yes.
And I wanted to run the piece, but I didn't go through the formal arrangements and you know the legal maneuvering that's needed in order to play the piece on public access. But I so wanted to show it as a classic example how it is to be a producer and to really get to the core of what the problem is. You have such a knack for it. And I mean, you put on people, I mean, they're only expressing what they really feel, but to capture it and put it on television, which we need so desperately. You might go over that piece and that experience it was, and the show that you put on that day.
That young woman?
The young woman, and what she had talked about.
Yeah, I called the segment A Matter of Color.
A Matter of Color.
And this young woman talked about being hurt and wounded by her classmates in high school,
Right.
who made fun of her because she was burnt of skin, dark. And they made fun of her looks, and they said they couldn't play tag with her at night because if she closed her eyes, they'd never be able to find her and all that stuff. And she broke down and started crying because she said it was just too much, and she couldn't take it. And I thought it was a powerful statement, and it's very familiar, because many of us in coming up have been subjected to the same thing, where we have been so, and your opening of this program, Malcolm X again addresses this. What made you hate the shape of your nose, the color of your skin, the texture of your hair? How did that come about? And all of that was manifest in this young woman who was talking about how she was suffering. And many of us are suffering to this day. I came up with that whole environment in Harlem of being color struck and things of that nature, and it was very devastating. The thing that saved me was the nationalist fervor that began in Montgomery and had been in Harlem before with Garvey and whatnot, but that was a little before my time. But the civil rights movement opened my eyes, and then I began to listen to the street corner speakers, you know, and Michau and his bookstore, and the Nation of Islam and Adam Powell, and all of them were talking about blackness, which was a no-no, because up until then, if you call anybody black, those are fighting words. We were Negroes and proud of it, even though our knees were not growing.
Right.
you know? So I got a lot of nourishment and inspiration and a lot of clarity. And that began me on my quest to put together this story, and I'm still at it. But as you say, I agree. It's a privilege to do what I've done, and it was fought for by people I don't even know.
That's right.
And I hope that the work I've been doing meets to some degree with their approval,
Oh, yeah, I'm
because
sure.
I've done that in a way of saying thank you, and also because it's helped to straighten my spine and square my shoulders. Whatever prices I've paid, it's more than worth it, because I've grown. I've learned about what's up.
Right, right. You know, one of the most powerful times I've had in my life was the first time I had the privilege of I had a little VHS camera right next to you. You remember that time at Dr. Clark's
Oh, yes.
memorial?
Oh, yes.
And you were coming on the show the following week, and only reason I was able to shoot the memorial because I told them I was with you because they wanted to put me out. And I just want to go back to that moment and how much he influenced us. And I just want to play a short tune at that memorial site. And we'll just take a 5-minute break, and maybe we'll come back with some phone calls.
All right.
All right? Would you play that tape for me, please?
To sing for us his eye, his own respect.
Amy Peterson True.
My,
That
my,
was
my.
a treat, huh? You remember that night?
What they used
That
to
was-
say in those days? Do Jesus.
Did you? And we were just saying that she wasn't a professional. She was the niece of a secretary of Dr. Clark at the time. She was brought in from the Midwest just to sing that
Oh, she's
couple of songs.
just magnificent. That was quite a day.
Yeah, that was quite a day.
Yes.
Matter of fact, the piece we just played, I had interviewed Dr. Ben.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, it ran last Wednesday. I played that piece, and I thought I'd come bring it back and
Thank you.
review that evening. But that was the first time I'd gotten close to being a producer. I was in such awe of what happened that day, because I didn't know Dr. Clark like I should have, and I felt like a lost child. I was in such awe of everybody. I remember Professor Smalls was there, and everybody knew Dr. Clark except me. I felt like I had really missed something. And there's so many things, like we played a piece there that Wesley Snipes had done, The Great and Mighty Walk.
Yes.
Now, that was very little. There's no publicity on that one. There's a great piece right there that should have been
Yes.
promoted more.
Yes.
There was a giant of a man, really a true historian who taught himself how to read and write, and became a doctorate of how many degrees after so many years. There's a man who really pulled himself up by his bootstrap, coming out of Alabama?
I think it was Georgia. I may be
He
mistaken.
was raised in Georgia and born in Alabama, I think
Maybe,
it was, in
yeah.
1915.
Yeah.
Sharecropper's son.
Yes.
And it was amazing, the story, that Great and Mighty Walk. I recommend anybody that can get a copy of that piece by Wesley Snipes. Beautiful piece.
Yes.
And it's really
St. Clair Bourne, I think, did.
Yes, the director,
Yes. But Wesley underwrote
Produced
it, I
it.
hear.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, it leads me up to what we've been discussing for quite some time. It's a project that I take particular pride in wanting to do, possibly with your help, black biographies. This is paramount to our survival, to promote how people survive in this trauma we call America. It's especially in the light of what happened the last 4 years with Bush, and what's going to happen in the next 4 years. And I see 2005, I see terrorism on the uprise. I read that they were shooting, inoculating soldiers for anthrax, and the soldiers are coming down with all kinds of diseases. There are all sorts of maddening things in the name of corporate greed. All this is happening. There's no other answer but to teach our kids how to survive in this environment. So I think
agree.
only outlet is to us as a people and producers to produce a different state of mind, to understand how it is to survive and make people more aware of what's happening. One of the few places where you see the truth is on public access. Thank God for public access.
Yes, I think that you're right, that we need to really tell our own story.
Okay.
But I think that the two important components, you need to really know your history so that you can set a context that will help you understand the person that you're documenting.
Okay.
I think that's very, very important. I think that we need to be as best prepared as possible.
Okay.
You can't really tell the story of John Henrik Clark unless you know something about Schaumburg.
Right,
You know,
right.
and also the conditions that he came up under, so that you can guide the interview and put it in a context. A man or a woman's life is really shaped by the conditions under which they grew
The
up.
times.
So if you don't establish that context, you do a disservice to the subject. So I think that those of us who are interested in doing producing and documenting really need to do homework.
History.
It was one thing that came across to me very quickly, that I needed to do my homework.
Okay.
I must again tell you that I didn't start off at 90 miles an hour in this career as a filmmaker.
Right.
I didn't know much about my history. Coming out of Harlem, I still didn't know much.
Right.
And so I had to really play catch up and do some reading and whatnot. And I've been blessed, you know, to catch up to some degree. But it's really, that is the heart and soul of doing nutritious programming.
All right, let's hear from the public. I thought it might be a treat or interesting to see what kind of phone calls we can get.
All right.
And what kind of questions people will ask.
Hello.
Yes.
Hi, good to see you.
How are you?
Fine. And I'm glad to see Mr. Noble on a different channel.
You have to turn down the volume on your television.
All right. Okay. I said I'm glad to see Mr. Noble on another channel.
Thank you.
My thing is, what I wanted to say was, I'm with Mr. Gilchrist when shut down Harlem, put up some fences, because it's totally changed. The police are on a warpath. White people think they've been here before us. And the police are out of control, like 2 o'clock in the morning. You don't see police cars anymore. What you see are unmarked cars with tinted windows. And then they tell the pedestrians they can't have tinted windows, but they can. They jump out the car, throw people up against the wall. Well, it's 2 o'clock in the morning. They spend hours and hours riding around the same block, just picking at people. So the police are out of control. This whole country is out of control, and something will happen to make it wake up.
You have a question?
So that was my comment. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you. That's the state of affairs, you know, living in Harlem. I was walking down the street with a bag in my hand. I was dressed middle of the day, Saturday afternoon, and cops stopped me and said, "What do you got in your hand?" And luckily I had the cap on a bottle of beer, a small bottle of beer, at 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
How recent was this?
This summer. That's past summer. 3 o'clock on a Saturday afternoon. They had all right, next phone call? Yes? Yes, you're on.
Oh, hi.
Hi.
Mr. Gilchrist.
Yes.
I'm interested in your historical perspective with regard to ordinary people's lives.
Right.
Because I feel that even the great ones had to start out just as ordinary people. So in that sense, we are our own history maker. And just the ordinary things could be documented. How would one go about, say, documenting, say, an uncle or a person? I think you might know, I talked to you about, I have an uncle who is an inventor.
Are you Cassandra?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Thank you for calling.
Hi.
Right, yeah. Well, that'd be a great biography. That's what I'm talking about. This is what I mean, that if you take the whole premise of showing how people are successful in life and doing biographies on them and teaching others, you know, which direction through all these frustrating things that we go through, how do people still succeed?
Well, the other thing is that even though he is an inventor and he has several patents, he is being stopped from the ultimate success of being financially secure in his invention because he meets with the resistance of how can we let this 80-year-old black man become a Bill Gates?
Right, okay.
How can we, how do you approach the system if you have this huge invention and the system won't let you in? So you can't become history because they won't let you. So how do you show the struggle of that person and still make it relevant to say, even this is a success, but it's not financially successful.
Well, one of the reasons that we have Gil here today, we're talking about doing something as a team of producers, and you stay tuned and you'll see a corporate structure where we can take in people, and so that, especially people with talent like that, and have an invention, and you have some sort of protective cover.
Yeah.
We need a black corporation where we can cover things like this, where we have a networking system where you know, somebody in the family, a corporate family, can be covered and protected.
Well, he's invented an engine that can clear the air of.
Oh, right.
And it almost got stolen from him by NASA.
Well, we'll talk about that. We're going to do something about that.
We need to talk about it, and I would love to do his story, because he came from rural Georgia.
Okay.
He like Mr. Gil Noble just said, he has a history.
Okay.
He was raised in rural Georgia during the Depression, and was on the Navy boat that got hit in Pearl Harbor, and was in the galley and almost got killed. So he has a history of surviving. Also a wife that tried to kill him.
Well, we can't, you know, Cassandra, we can't tell the whole story right now.
No, but come into that context too.
Okay.
I like context.
All right.
So we'll talk.
Well, we'll definitely talk. We're talking already.
Thank you.
But I know your story very well.
Love
All right.
the show.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Now, that was happened to be somebody I've been talking to about an uncle, so it's a very interesting story, but we'll talk about that further. We only have a few minutes left. Quite a few people on the phone. Somebody have another question?
Hello?
Yes.
Yeah, let me ask you a question. You just mentioned a topic earlier
Involving what?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, you just mentioned earlier about involving Stop and Frisk in Harlem. I mean, basically, you know, I used to live in Harlem one time, but now I live on the Upper West Side of Manhattan, you know what I'm saying? And my topic is, the question we asked you, have you been aware lately in the news media, there's been a lot of secret suicides, people jumping out of buildings in Manhattan recently, and these doormans, particularly whites, are jumping out and committing suicide and jumping out of buildings lately? Have you been aware about that?
No.
There's been articles about that in certain papers around, in like papers like in the West Side Resident, and they're not exposing this close enough in the media, and it's the same thing what happened during the Great Depression back in 1929. It's like you're starting to see that all over again. You know, and it's like a rapid payback was going on. You know what I'm saying? I mean, are you all aware about this?
No, you got me on that one.
Oh, I see.
I was wondering if you're aware, because you see a lot of these successful
NYU
Caucasian whites that are jumping out of buildings in Manhattan, where predominantly doorman buildings.
Okay.
And they start exposing this out in the media now. They're keeping that very hush-hush. And I was wondering if you have been aware about that.
No, not at all. I think somebody on the set might have something to do with that, or know something about that.
You know, even though you have, you know, we live in a climate where everything is based on stress and peer pressure.
Well, do you have any questions to ask us? I know you're trying to make us aware of other things going on. There's so many problems, but we're concerned about Harlem and.
The draft?
This is not a question there. You have some direct question to us, not be giving us a current event lesson. All right?
Right.
Okay? Stick to the subject matter, please.
Well, yeah, that's my particular question.
All right. Thank you for calling.
Hello?
There's another voice.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
My question is to Mr. Noble. Before, I don't want to say we were free or anything, but years ago when it was in the, shall I say, black presence, and we were just separate but sort of equal, do you think things should have stayed that way? We were better off that way than we are now? This question is for Mr. Noble, please.
Do I think that things were better before than they are now?
Yeah, you know, when we were just black shunned away, we were over there and they were over there.
Well, segregation, you mean?
Sure.
Oh, okay. You think we were better off with segregation?
Was it better back then than it is now, I think?
Or do you think we were better off when we had segregation?
Oh, sure.
Okay.
I I believe in equal but separate. That's what I mean.
That's
What do
interesting.
you think about that, Mr. Noble?
Well, I do believe, as I said, in us controlling our own turf and having control over our communities and our businesses and things of that nature. And it's an interesting point because before the civil rights movement, there were many communities where we were forced to have our own stores.
That's right.
And our own beauty parlors.
Right.
We did our own nails in those days, the women, you know, and all of that stuff. And now that we've got integration, there have been some setbacks because there are a lot of businesses that we don't control. There are very few businesses in any black community that we control. I think that there are gains and losses that have come out of the civil rights movement. I've said it before and I'll say it again. But I think the onus is on us now to really control, if it is right for other people to control their own economy, if it is right for people of French origin to control their own existence here and also see to it that the economy of France remains in the hands of the French and the English, they're interested in England being in control of the English, then it is right for us to see to it that Africa is in the control of our people, of our African people.
Amen.
You go to Africa and you don't see Africans sitting up, laying up around the pool, enjoying the fruits of the wealth of that country. You see Europeans. And on and on and on. There's not enough time on this program to cite it, but I think you know what I mean. So I think that, in a sense, separation has its place and makes an awful lot of sense, especially when it comes to us controlling our own. I believe in that.
Thank you. I hope that answers your question. We had a call before about the NYU incident. We have a producer here, Greg, that has some explanation for that comment. We only have a few minutes, Greg. Why don't you give us a...
Well, what the caller was talking about was that the high rate of suicide in New York was among the New York University jumping out of...
You get a camera on?
Jumping out of the dorms. So that's what
Tell them four.
to that caller.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. You were on camera. Well, it's camera 2, slot 4, but okay.
I got another question.
Okay.
Yes.
Sure.
Well, tell him to go to camera 2.
Camera 2.
Go to camera 2.
It's actually, I've got a program for slot 4.
Mr.
Oh,
Noble, my
4.
question to you is, what's happening to our black leaders, our leaders that were out in the forefront? What do you, in your opinion, what happened to the Jesse Jackson now that he's a world leader, but he started off in our community? What happened to Reverend Al Sharpton, who also was on the forefront of making things happen? What's going on? What do you see this happening? All of a sudden they're taking, if I may, a back step, or they're going out to Hollywood, or they're
Mike
not
3.
on the forefront like they used
Mike
to be.
3.
I think the onus is on the masses of black people to keep our politicians and our leaders honest and of service to us. Leaders don't just ride into town out of the sunset and come into town on a white horse and lead us to glory. Leaders are made by the people. We have a grievance, we get together, we nominate a leader, just like we did in Montgomery. That's the way it should happen. And once you nominate and elect your leader, then you are obligated to see that they remain loyal and of service to your cause. Many times when we go to vote, after we pull the lever, if it's counted at all,
Right.
the leader never hears from us. There's no collective power base to call them to task, tell them to come every week and tell us what you're doing in Washington or at City Hall. We don't do that. So I think the onus is on us to keep our leaders and our representatives honest. Otherwise, you see, there are so many enticements. Leaders and, politicians are subjected to a lot of enticements, and some of them go astray.
That's true. I'm not sure if you heard Greg's question, because we had an audio problem. Did they hear you, your question? They heard you, okay. All right, but we have another phone call. All right, one more and then tell them at 50s.
Hello?
Yes.
Hi, I want to say good evening to both of you, Mr. Noble and Mr. Gilchrist. And I heard, Gilchrist, I heard you say something earlier about the fact that you were stopped with a bag or something to that effect.
Yeah.
And, you know, it just seems like what's really going on now is just, I mean, it's been going on for a long time, but it's an all-out attack, really, on the black community. And I've said this before, you know, and I caught a lot of flack for saying it sometimes, but I've said that white men create conditions that give birth to chaos. And what I mean by that is basically is that they have a propensity for offsetting the initial conditions which really result in a chaotic situation. It seems like what's happening now in the black community is that the black male is in a state of chaos, and this was supposed to have happened probably 100 years ago, over 100 years ago, when we were freed. They thought that we would just go crazy then. And when that didn't happen and black people really began to pull together and to form their own businesses and to form successful towns, history is replete with examples of those towns and businesses being attacked by white men in this country. It just seems as if, I mean, people always tell black people to pull themselves up by the bootstraps, but every time we've done that, we have come under severe attack. I mean, it is so obvious that we are just, it's like it is in their game plan to make us dependent on them, and that is a global situation. White supremacy is a global institution. It is not just limited to the United States. It is this mindset that white men seem to have that they are basically supposed to be in a position of rulership, and everyone else on this planet is supposed to be here for their comfort.
Well, if you believe that and understand that, then I don't see why you should be disappointed when white supremacy and white dominance prevails. That's the character that we're up against. The problem is, what are we going to do about it?
Well,
but I don't think we should be disappointed because they haven't changed.
No, and we shouldn't expect them to change.
All right.
I think we should know that by now.
Therefore,
but we have to get out of this maniacal mentality. See, it's like I don't believe in, and I don't mean to target certain individuals, but sometimes you have to name call. You know, the Bob Johnsons from the BETs, the Russell Simmons. These are people who get on television and talk about get out and vote, and they do all of this stuff, but yet they are the main profiteers of the selling of negative stereotypical images of black people all across this globe. You look at the videos on BET, and you look at some of the artists and the videos that a Russell Simmons and a Puff Daddy put out, it is always about the young black male being a low-level thinking, criminal-minded street thug. The only thing he can do is go out and commit crime. And those are the images that are being broadcast all across the world.
my question to you is, what are you doing about it?
Well, what am I doing about it?
Yeah.
Well, I talk to people on a one-to-one basis. I try not to get too preachy because people don't want you to preach. And basically, I try to live my life as an example, you know, for the young children in my community to look at me and to say, okay, well, this is a young black male who's not standing on the street corner. He works. He carries himself with respect and dignity.
Okay.
No, the most important words that Frederick Douglass left us with were his last words. It was one word: agitate. So it's not enough for you just to be, you know, within the limited confines and you know, have a decent life and you carry yourself well. You must agitate. If you see injustice, you must find a way to agitate against it. Otherwise, oppression will never die.
If I could just close with this, I know the show's about to be over, but in the year 2004, black people should be at the state where we are policing ourselves. We should not be in a community where white people are an occupying force, and we should not have to curtail our behavior so that white men who wear uniforms and carry badges and guns can stand guard.
You know, I want you to stay in touch, keep in tune. You have a lot of good things to say, and we'll perhaps even have you on the show so you can really have a ear to say. We have to wrap up now, but make sure that we have your name and number, or call back when you see the 917 number behind.
Okay, great.
All right?
Thank you.
Now, I really, this is the crux of the problem. People talk about, BET, how Bob Johnson sold out, and all you see is a flood of, booty shaking and demeaning our women and calling our women out of their names, and whereas we all come from females. It's ridiculous, and a lot of us are angry, and we sort of lash out at each other, and it's going to happen even more. So that's why we need to get together and produce images that are beneficial, that create a sense of pride in each of us, and show our history, and this is what's necessary.
You go to see a doctor, and the doctor says you have a severe problem. You have an ulcer that's malignant in your stomach, and he says, that's the diagnosis. I'll see you later.
Mm-hmm.
What are you going to say to the surgeon? Where are you going, man? Come in and get this thing out of me.
Right.
Do something about the malignancy.
Right.
The diagnosis is good, but then you got to go to the surgery.
Amen.
I believe that.
Thank you for coming. The God in me loves the